Okay, guys, let me know if you can hear me okay. I am far away from my microphone. It's right here. My husband doesn't have the one stand operating, and I don't feel like messing with it, so that is why. All right, let me get this over here. So I can see if there's questions, comments. Okay, there we go. How are you all today? All right, I'm going to turn my phone off because it just went off. And I'm going to charge it just a second. I got this situated. Oh, this audio is far away. So I can fix it. Yeah. In a box and see if medium closer helps. No, that helps. All right. Hopefully that is okay. It looks like audio is working on my end. All right. Let me know if there's any more issues. I'm going to get into it. Okay. So today I'm going to talk about this topic. I found one of the most important things when raising kids is that you and your husband stand united on important things. If you as the man undermine your husband in any way, we're going to switch to this and see if that's better. The microphone is not working. I'm just going to unplug it and I'm coming through the webcam now. So hopefully, just a minute. Hello, hello, hello. Okay. For some reason, this super high duper quality microphone is failing me. So we're going through the webcam. It's going to be a little gravelly, probably a little muffly through the webcam, but it's better than not being able to hear anything through that. So let me start over. If this wasn't live, I would just go back and edit all that out. So today we're talking about being united when raising your kids. So I found one of the most important things when raising kids is that you and your husband are united on important things. If you as the mom undermine your husband in any way, your kids will pick up on that. When allowing my teens or young adults to do anything, I always approach it as, yes, you can, your dad won't mind, or no, you can't, your dad wouldn't like that. They know there's no absolute way to get me to turn on him or to get him to turn on me. They get to a point where they don't even try that. So what are some ways that you can establish that ground rule with little kids? And what are some ways to stand united when raising children? Because I'm going to tell you, little kids are very good at manipulating. I mean, we're all born with a sin nature, and we all learn from a very, very early age how to get our own way, right? We don't like being told no. We know how to kind of manipulate and find ways and be sneaky and try to get our own way. And even as kids get older, as teenagers, even, they're going to find ways to try to maybe, make one parent think that the other parent thinks it's okay or whatever. We've had our teenagers try that with us too. But this really does establishing the ground rule of your dad and I are united starts when they're little kids. So I would say, first off, number one, have a plan for how you want your kids raised. And obviously, this is going into marriage and all that comes with that. Say, for instance, are we in a homeschool? Am I going to be a stay-at-home mom? Even talking about the number of kids that you do have. And, this is a big thing because if you are someone who, like me, I was when I got married, I wanted a large family. I was not going to marry someone who only wanted one or two kids. I was going to marry someone who had a large family of mine. My husband and I were both the oldest of five. And from the time that we got married, we both were like, we want 10 kids, we want a big family. So that was always just well known that, we were hoping to have a large family if God gave us a large family. And from the time that we were married, we had our mindset, if you're old enough to get married, you need to be old enough to bear the responsibility of having a kid. So we never tried preventing from day one. I mean, our first was born 9 months to the day that we got married. He was born 4 weeks early, but he was born 9 months to the day that we got married. So, obviously God did bless us with a lot of kids, and that was just something I always wanted, but he wanted it too, and he was on board. And the goal from the time that we got married was being a stay-at-home mom, not necessarily homeschooling, because when we first started having kids, my husband was actually the principal of a large one-room ACE school and in our church, and our church offered that just for members' kids. It wasn't like open enrollment, but if you went to the church, you could take advantage of that perk, if you want to call it that. And basically it was run by the parents of the church. So my husband kind of was there every day overseeing it. But then the parents of the kids would volunteer, like the moms would volunteer a day a week, and they would be like the helper for the day, right? One or two moms each day for the week. So I will say it was a blessing that I was able to utilize that when my kids were younger, especially because I had so many kids so fast, right? I had 3 kids in 3 years. So and it ended up that we lived right next door to the church. So every morning I would just send my kids over to school where my husband was. And so then they got the best of both worlds. They had dad at school during the day. Then they had me when they got home from school. So it worked really well for us. When we moved here, there was no other option but to homeschool. So about 15 years ago, I was kind of thrust into this world of homeschooling, and it was a lot of responsibility. And it was just, I knew that the only situation where I would send my children to a Christian school, private school, was kind of the situation that we had at Lighthouse. It was very unique, where my husband was there every day, and then it was ran by the parents of the other kids. So I knew that was a unique situation. So I just knew inevitably that responsibility fell into my lap, and I rose to the occasion. And we've been homeschooling for the last 15 years. So some of my kids have not been homeschooled like the entire way through, but the majority. I do have, I believe Chloe is one of my first that graduated that was homeschooled from kindergarten all the way through. Allison will be the next in a couple of years, and then our gaps start getting bigger. So 4 down, 4 left to go. But that was just a known that I was going to be the one staying at home raising the kids. My husband was going to be the one providing for the bills, working a job, all that stuff. And we were on the same page, as that. Also church, obviously my husband's in ministry. We're going to raise our kids in church. And he made sure to marry someone who had the same ideals as him when it came to that. So yeah, definitely first before anything, if there's any single women watching this, you need to make sure you're on the same page across the board with your husband. And then I would say next, after you get married, make it your life's mission to really know your husband. Get to know your husband, get to know what he likes, get to know what he wants, get to know his ideals, get to know his likes, get to know his dislikes. I often joke with my husband that one of my jobs in life, as has helped me, is to know him and know him very well. And so I know we can go into any restaurant and I can sit there and order food to his liking. I know exactly his preferences, his taste. I know what he won't like. I know what he will like. He's a very picky eater when it comes to like condiments and like sauces and different things like that, like and cheese. So basically any type of creamy sauce with sour cream, cream cheese, but he'll eat cheesecake. So he's a little bit of a hypocrite, but I know all of his preferences. So I can sit and look at a menu and I can say, you won't like that, you will like that, you know. So as far as his food taste, I know what he expects out of our children. I know the things that he wants McMurtry kids to excel in and the things that he doesn't want in our lives. And so as a mom, being with my kids 24/7, I am it's my job to kind of make the things that are priority to him priority in our home. So, and it's my job. I feel like for me personally, it's my job to really know my husband and know him well. I joke with him all the time because I'm like, I could sit and order anything off a menu for you, but you probably would have no idea what I like. And he probably my friends would actually like know what I like more than he does. But he was like, well, it's because you eat all kinds of different food. And I do. I'm going to say I'm not a picky eater. And basically, that I will not, the only thing that I will not eat, I don't like are onions, you know, crunchy onions. That's my one rule. I don't like onions. So, anything else, though, I'll try new stuff, you know, I'll try whatever. But, um, I was kind of joking with him saying, do you even know what my favorite snack is? And he did pick out a snack for me for my birthday and he did a good job. But with snacks, if you basically pick out anything that's pickle flavored, I'm gonna love it because that's my jam is pickles. I love anything pickle flavored. So, and he did. He picked out pickle, what was it? Pickle Pringles. It was like Pringles, like these little Pringle puffs, but they were pickly. They were good. Yes, Sarah, you could. Sarah could totally pick my food for me. We could go into a restaurant, she could sit down and pick what I like. So that's what I'm saying. My friends probably could over my husband, but he would just be like, I have no clue. So, but yeah, going back to though being united with him, don't go over his head. And this is a big deal. You know, you would be shocked being in the ministry for as long as I have. I've heard a lot of stories, and some I'm like, there's no way that could be true. And then others, I'm like, knowing people and knowing how people are, I'm like, okay, well, I could see that being true. I've heard of pastors' wives going over their husband's head and facilitating like meetups with their daughter's boyfriend and, you know when their husband was out of town. And I'm just like, I'm thinking, if you want to ruin your kids, go over your husband's head about everything. Be sneaky, be deceptive, because that's what you're teaching them. You're teaching them to be sneaky. You're teaching them to be deceptive. And I'm sorry, this kind of character, it's not only going to be before they're married, you're teaching them to set that foundation for a lifetime in their marriage, to be sneaky, to be deceptive. None of us want husbands that are being sneaky, right? That are like sneaking around behind our back, that are, you know, having different relationships with other women. That's awful. So why would we exhibit that type of behavior for our children? But this is very, very important not to go over his head. And it could be even for little things, you know, it starts small. So what in my home, what my husband says goes. Okay. So what's important to my husband is important to me as well. And I try to get that across to my children. So this could be with a lot of things, like the way he wants you to homeschool. When we did start homeschooling, it was my husband made it very, very, very clear that he wanted me to take it seriously. He said, I've known way too many people in ministry, missionaries, families, pastors' families, and their kids always end up getting behind in school. And he's like, that's not okay. I don't want my kids behind in school. My kids, he's like, our kids will complete every year of school they need to. So the way that our program is, it's PACES is ACE. Every subject that they do has 12 booklets in each subject. That's it. Like if you do it consistently, you're going to finish a full year of school from August to May. No problem. In fact, you're probably going to be ahead. In fact, when my kids were going to the Christian school at Lighthouse, we took off every Monday because Sunday they were required, as part of being in the school, was you were required to be in the church ministries as well, because it was a free service offered for the church members. So that was part of the requirements. You were to be in church for all the activities. And so because we were at church all day on Sunday, they would give the kids Monday off. That was kind of a day off. Well, even doing school Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, 4 days a week, the students had no problems finishing an entire year of school. So if you're just consistent, you're going to finish. And he was like, I've seen way too many pastors' kids, like they don't take school seriously. They don't think it's a big deal. He's like, we're not raising dumb kids. And he's like, we're going to take it very seriously. And I was telling one of my friends about this, but I was at the public library this past week. We were renewing our library card, and it was an older librarian. I'd never seen her before. There's a couple there that I've known for years, but neither one of them were there. And for some reason, when she looked us up, it'd probably only been 3 or 4 months since our cards expired, but we have to pay yearly because it's not on our taxes. We're out of city limits. And so we have to pay $80 or $85. And so as soon as I got the money, I was going to go and renew them. So we did. We went and we were going to renew them, and she could not find us in the system at all for some reason, which was really weird. And so we had to start over, and we had to start filling out the cards. And she was like, now, do your kids go to Sterling Public Schools? And I said, no, I homeschool. And instantly it was like, she was just like, oh. And then she was like, I didn't even ask, but she kind of goes into this long spiel about how I was a public school teacher for 30 years or 50 years or something. She was older. So I don't know, it might have been 50. I can't remember the exact years that she said, but she's like, I was a teacher for blah, blah, blah. And I really believe that public schooling is the way to go. And, it's a very good education. I was like, okay, yeah, I'm glad you feel that way. And she's like, well, I just know a lot of homeschoolers who don't do it. And I was like, well, I'm sure they're out there. I said, but most of the homeschoolers I know, and myself included, were very serious about it. And, blah, blah, blah. And she just like, yes, well, I've just known too many that don't take it seriously. So she got like kind of an attitude with me right at the beginning. And I was like, well, my kids have done really well. They've excelled. And, both my girls, they work at a daycare, and my one has a CDA. My other one's gotten her CDA. I said, and my son was just hired on, and he's in police academy. And she was just like, oh, like she instantly changed. It was like, once she heard that my kids were like excelling in society, she was fine. And so it was just funny though, because I guess homeschooling can have a stigma, and I don't even know. Oh, I know where I was going with that. But yes, my husband, from the time that we started to homeschool, he was like, we're taking it very seriously. So when especially my kids were younger, that was my full-time job. Okay. I knew, because it was important to him, that I was going to make it important as well. And that was the main priority, was we're doing school. And so, yes, I took that very seriously. Even the way that he wants the home ran, though, needs to be. Sorry, I'm answering texts. Even the way that he wants the home run, I'm going to be doing it the way that he wants it run. I don't want to do anything that he wouldn't like. So like the discipline that he wants in place for the kids, I'm going to observe that. I'm going to do things the way that he wants it. And then, so his priorities become your priorities or our priorities. So learn to handle the small disputes at home. Just a second here. I cannot multitask, guys. My phone is like going crazy, so I'm trying to return some text right now. But yeah, learn to handle the small disputes at home. You don't need to like bring in the big guns every time. And, you kind of know what his priorities are. You know, the way that he wants the kids raised, the way he wants the kids trained. So you are the main one who's putting fires out at home. Obviously for bigger things, you can tell them to ask dad and tell them to have dad. You can ask dad to step in if you need him and I've done that before. The kids kind of know it's like serious if I have to ask dad to come in. So, and then disagree behind closed doors. I'm not talking about minor arguments. Obviously, things are going to come up. You're going to have minor arguments. But if you have, let's say that you're really struggling with the decision that maybe he's made, you're with the kids. And as time goes on, he's going to learn to trust your discernment more and more as time goes on. But when he first doesn't, when you're first starting out, you're kind of getting to know each other. And you have to learn to trust him. He has to learn to trust you. And he's going to learn eventually that, your gut instinct is really good, especially since you're with the kids all the time. Let's say that he made a rash decision and didn't really think it through. And you as the mom, you can see potential problems down the road from that because your kids, maybe it's not going to go well with their personality, or maybe he was a little too harsh or something, so you can bring that up to him in a calm way behind closed doors, not in front of the kids though. The kids don't need to see you questioning his decisions when it comes to even discipline or I'm not talking about abusive situations here. Obviously, if your husband is going over the top and he's harming your children in some way, that's not okay. Okay, so I'm not talking about him going crazy and beating them and throwing things at them. And, obviously, if he's going to hurt your child and bring harm or damage, that's not okay. You need to, probably intervene for that because you got to protect your children. Those are your children. You are supposed to protect them. So I'm not talking about abusive situations. I'm talking about discipline within means, right? Things that are not going to damage them, not going to psychologically damage them, emotionally damage them, break them, whatever. I'm talking about a decent person, a decent dad. Maybe that just is doing something you don't totally agree with. So I would say take those disagreements behind closed doors. And then even if you don't agree with something, just be quiet about it. It's harder said than done, but definitely just be quiet about it. So remember that unity is more important than being right. And I know we all struggle with this because we all want to prove that we're right. We want to be right, but kids can sense the friction. And even if your husband is wrong, what is the big deal? So is it really going to alter your life in this massive way if you're right and your husband's wrong? Even if he is wrong, he will bear the responsibility for that as the head of the household. So just let go of it. You don't need to control every situation. Life is a lot better when you just learn that there's some things that are out of your control and you don't have to control every situation. And you don't have to control every decision that your husband makes or every decision he doesn't make, or if he's doing something that you don't exactly agree with, is it really going to hurt you? What if he says he wants tacos every Tuesday and you don't agree with that because you don't like making tacos every Tuesday? In the grand scheme of things, is it really going to kill you to make tacos every Tuesday? No, it's not. So you need to learn what is worth getting upset about and what's not. And I feel like women, I'm speaking as a woman, okay? I feel like we can really get upset about a lot of trivial things that in the grand scheme of things, they just don't matter. So, your husband needs to have complete confidence that you're going to back him up. And I've often thought about this before, like how belittling is it for men, especially men, when these are men who excel in the workplace. Okay. Maybe they're a pastor, or they're a firefighter, or a police officer, or a welder, or whatever, but whatever field they're in, they excel. And then they have wives who don't even have enough trust in them to follow their leadership. How belittling that must make him feel, how that must like attack his, you know, how that just must make him feel, right? So how belittling that is. And, us as wives, we should be respecting our husbands in public, obviously, but also respecting him in his own home. Because even if he's successful in the career field, he's going to feel very small if he comes home and then he's put down, his leadership isn't followed, his wife is just doing whatever she wants, and she doesn't care what he says, she doesn't care, whatever, blah, blah, blah. So definitely give him, just realize that unity is more important than being right. And you don't have to control every situation. You don't have to control every decision. You don't have to control everything. Let him lead. If you want your kids to respect your husband, you model that for them. Oftentimes I've seen very well-respected men, but their wives do not respect them. Very well-respected men in the world, but their wives do not respect them. And so that in turn trickles down to the kids. And the kids then grow up with very little respect for their dad because their mom had very little respect for their dad. If your kids try pitting you against each other, show them it won't work, and there will be consequences if they do try that. Okay, so you should have the same goals as each other. And we kind of talked about that in the beginning. But having kids who respect both of you is so vital to raising godly kids. And it's vital in even when, okay, so I have 6 girls. So for my girls, I'm modeling to them what a good wife should look like. The first example they're going to have of what a good wife looks like, what a good mom looks like, what a good friend, what a good person, what a good Christian, the first model they're going to have is me. And so I'm modeling to them. And, as goes the mom, oftentimes goes the daughter. So the daughter is going to carry a lot of the same traits when it comes to interacting with their husband someday. So for us, we're exhibiting that to our children. And that's going to carry over into future relationships with them. And then for the sons too, oftentimes the way the dad treats the mom, that's modeled to them how they should treat their future wife. So you as the mom know your kids the best. When they're manipulating, when they're trying to pit you against each other. You have to constantly communicate with your husband, or they'll try to pull fast ones. And we have seen this before. We've seen it where there has, like, I've had maybe a teenager, they shall remain unnamed, and they'll come to me and they'll be like, Dad said this was okay. But when they talk to Dad, they left out some key points, like, I'm going to be driving 2 hours. I'm going to not get home till 1 a.m. It might be stuff like that. And so then they'll be like, is that okay? Dad said it was okay. But then when Dad finds out, wait a minute, they're not going to be back till 1. Well, Mom said it was okay. So then it's almost kind of like they're trying to throw you under the bus because Mom said it was okay. But wait, Dad didn't know all the details. And so for me with my teenagers, I've extracted all the information that I can. And then I will run it by Dad. And I'll say, because oftentimes as soon as they tell me, I'm like, he's not going to like that. Or I'm like, he won't care about that. So I kind of know based off when they first tell me, but I'll just ask him, did so-and-so come to you and run this by you? And then yes, no, and then we'll talk about it. And then whatever Dad says goes. So, and it's not saying that you can never have opinion, or there have been times where my husband, I don't know if any other husbands are like this, but he doesn't really like giving a definite yes or no answer. He is always like, oh, I suppose so, or oh, I don't really like that. It's hard for him to just like say yes or no. And so oftentimes when I can tell he's kind of going back and forth about it, if I think it's not a big deal, I'll be like, this isn't really a big deal. I think you should let her go. different things like that. And then, wise husbands will listen to their wives and they'll listen to their wives' input. And so oftentimes that'll be the deciding factor. Is mom on board? Is she not on board? I can use a little persuasion sometimes, but one thing I won't do is just outright tell him in front of the kids, especially, this is stupid, you're overreacting, you should let them go, you shouldn't let them go. I might say something later behind closed doors, like when we're going to bed or something, be like, I really know that she really wants to go and it would mean a lot to her. And, but then once he decides and I'm going to back him up in that, no matter what it is, I'm going to back him up. And so it's just constantly communication. Communication is the key, especially when raising teenagers. You both need to be on the same page. You need to know what's going on. I would say be unified even on things you don't necessarily agree with as a whole, especially in front of the children. And that could be different activities that you do, food, basically when it comes to food, I make what my husband likes. I know what he's going to like. I don't make lasagna ever because he will not eat that. Anything with like a cream cheese base or sour cream in it, he's not going to eat it. So I just don't make food with that for him. Politics even, it's not bad if your kids are seeing you have discussions about politics. But let's say that you're just totally against something that your husband's promoting. It's not good to just be cutting him down for his opinions, saying, well, I disagree. That's not the way, they need to see a unified front even on that. Even it's just letting him talk and you just keeping your mouth shut, and not making facial things with your face as he's doing it, because, we have a way of getting our point across without even really getting it across. Especially religion, what am I going to be, Baptist? Following his leading to where he wants us to go for church. And sometimes this is easier said than done, because let's say that you're a part of a church where there are some problems and you see them, but yet he wants to still go. Sometimes as a wife, you're just going to have to trust that he's the one bearing the responsibility for it. And you're just going to go and make the best of it, because your kids are going to see if you're unified even on that front. And if you want your kids to someday listen to the preaching from a pastor or something, they can't see you constantly picking the pastor apart, constantly picking apart the people in the church. There's people even in our church that my kids have a lot of respect for, and they will do certain things in their life, or they won't do certain things in their lives because they know it will encourage the people in our church or it would devastate the people in our church. So there's people here that they love very much, and they want them to be happy with them as well. So that plays into the decisions that they make. But if we go home and we're just constantly, can you believe this person did this? And can you believe this person did this? And we're, as the pastor's family, we're constantly, cutting down people in our church. They're not going to care. And I want the people in my church to be a good influence on my kids. And the pastors' families that I have seen succeed, and this is one thing we've tried to emulate with our own kids, are the ones who have the people in their church on board with them. They have them on their side. They're rooting for their kids. They want their kids to be successful. They don't want their kids to fail. They're not sitting around like hoping the pastor's kids fail so that'll make them feel better about their failures with their kids. No, we're all in this together. So our family, other church members' families, we all want each other's kids to succeed. We all want each other's kids to thrive. We all want each other's kids to be godly and grow up to serve the Lord and raise their families in church. We all have the same goal. And so we're very unified in that here. I don't feel like anyone in our church would like rub their hands with glee if one of my kids failed or something. And that's really good, because unfortunately, there are some churches where the people are sitting around kind of hoping that the pastor's kids fail. And that's another reason too, my husband has tried not to put our kids on a pedestal, or like, my kids would never do this, or, because there are people then that are going to be praying for your kids to fail. And unfortunately, I know we have that outside of our church, but not in our church, which is very nice. When it comes to standards, being unified on standards. How does your husband want your boys to dress? How does your husband want your girls to dress? What kind of music does he want them listening to? What kind of shows does he like? What kind of shows does he not want them to watch? Different things like that. Standards are very, very important, where you need to be unified even when it comes to that. And then with dating as well. And this is where it just really blows my mind that there have been people or wives, pastors' wives, who they've facilitated relationships that they knew their husband would not approve of behind their husband's back. And to me, that shows me that, number one, they don't have a good relationship with their husband because they're willing to do that. But number two, they're trying to be a friend to their kids more than the mother to their friends or to their kids. And as moms, it's not our job to be our kids' friend. It is our job to guide them, to back up their dad, to make sure that we are reinforcing whatever their dad standards when it comes to dating, dressing, music, shows we watch, all of that. It's our job as moms to back up our husbands when it comes to those things. And so with the dating, there's been things where maybe I thought this could move a little faster, maybe we should move a little slower, but he's kind of been the one that has made that decision. And then, so far it's panned out very well with our kids that have been in dating relationships, but that is once again up to his discretion. And I'm just going to follow his lead on that. I'm not saying with all of these things, you can't put your input in. I don't believe that. I'm not one of these people that believe that women should just shut up in every area of life. That's ridiculous, especially since we are the ones that help me at home raising the children, right? We know our children as moms, we know our children more than anyone. So obviously we're going to have some input, but with us, I might give my input. And then if he rejects that input, then I just shut up about it. Then that's on him at that point. My husband's like this. I don't know if your husband's like this. He does not like being nagged at all. And so I pretty much have one chance to get my point across. And then sometimes he'll be like, yeah, I see your point. And he goes with it. He doesn't really care. And then other times he'll be like, no, we're doing it this way. And then at that point, I'm just going to drop it because it does not help to nag him about it. And I've tried to tell my girls this. I'm like, your dad does not like being nagged. So if you continually ask him over and over and over and pester him about it, he will just say no because you're driving him crazy. So he doesn't like being nagged. And I'm pretty sure most men are like that. If you ask them, if you did a poll, do you like to be nagged? But I mean, we don't either. How annoying does it get when your kids are like, mom, 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 can I do this? Can I do this? Can I do this? You don't answer right away. And it's just mom, 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 mom. Or you say no and it's, but mom. And then they give you 100 reasons why you should have said yes. That's super annoying. So we don't like it when people do it to us. So, once again, the whole concept of treat others the way you want to be treated, same thing goes. So, and then, yeah, that's about all I have for my outline. But yeah, I think unification is so important, and your kids learning early that it doesn't matter what they say or do, they're not going to pit mom against dad. And this actually happens in a lot of families where the kids will pit mom against dad, and then fighting will ensue, and then the kid ends up getting their way or whatever. So kids can be very manipulative, and you really got to watch out for them trying to pit you against each other. And I do feel like it is something that is learned. It's a learned behavior, but it goes back to maybe it succeeded at one time. So if it succeeds at one time and the kid sees, wow, that actually worked. I got my way because I managed to, make dad mad at mom and make mom mad at dad. And then, whatever, then if it succeeds at one time, they're going to be more apt to try it again. And so as parents, I would just say the number one thing is communication, being on the same page. Did so-and-so come to you about this activity? What do you think? Did you learn all the details? This is the details. Because there's been times before where my teenage girls have gone to my husband and run something by him. And they came to me then. And I was like, did you ask your dad? Because it kind of surprised me that their dad said yes. And they were like, yeah, I asked him. He's totally cool with it. Well, when I do some digging, I find out that they left some key components out. So that's why you, as the parent, as the mom, we're very vigilant. We can tell if our kids are trying to pull a fast one on us. And so oftentimes I'll go back to my husband. I'll be like, did they tell you that this was going on? Did they tell you that they would be doing this? And he's like, no, they never told me that. They left that detail out. I'm like, that's what I thought. And so kids have a way of leaving details out with one parent that they wouldn't with the other parent. And that's just them knowing us too. They know what I would be okay with. They know what their dad would be okay with, you know, so on and so forth. So kids can, they know us. They know what's up, and they learn from a very early age to be deceptive. And we got that from Adam and Eve. I mean, Eve especially, right? And the serpent, you know, tricking Eve or whatever. It's in us. So you as the mom got to be on top of it. But I think the most important thing is the kids that I have seen that grow up and they respect both mom and dad are kids who were raised in a home where they knew mom and dad were tight and that they could not get between mom and dad. And that whatever dad said went, and whatever mom said went, you know. And there have been times even where maybe it's more of like, not oftentimes, but maybe it's something that I just really am against. And maybe my husband doesn't really think it's a big deal. But because he wants our kids to respect me, he will go along with me, even though he doesn't really think it's a big deal either way. Right. So he will go ahead because he wants to be unified with me. And then same thing with me. Obviously, he is the final decision, but there have been things that maybe are not a big deal to me, but he really thinks they are, like the kids watching YouTube. When I say YouTube, I don't mean like Peppa the Pig, Bluey, because we'll let them watch that on YouTube. I'm talking about these stupid YouTube shows where it's like A for Adley, Miss Rachel, even Mr. Beast. No, it drives him nuts, the product placement and how they'll just have like products ever so often just like placed throughout the videos. And I'm like, babe, that's today's commercials. That's what commercials are nowadays, but it drives him nuts. So he banned that type of thing from our house. So to me, I think I'm like, it's kind of silly, but that is his pet peeve. He hates it. So because of that, I'm going to reinforce that. And Kelly one day, she was trying to pull up, she was like, oh, dad's not home. Can we watch YouTube? And I was like, no, you can't watch YouTube. Like I said, when I said YouTube, I mean like Mr. Beast, even Dude Perfect. They drive him nuts too. Yeah, we were just talking about this yesterday, Rachel. This is kind of the thing that gave me the idea was our conversation yesterday when we were talking about like YouTube and all that stuff. And I was like, I need to talk about like being unified on all fronts. But I actually had someone reach out a few weeks ago too, whose kid was trying that. They were kind of trying to pit one parent against the other. I was like, I haven't talked about that in a long time. I really need to, because I do think it's vital to raising very well adjusted, balanced kids who are then going to carry that into their marriage. You know, they saw that their parents were unified on everything, and they're going to want that in their marriage as well someday. So even with him, if it comes to something that I don't really think is a big deal, I'm going to back him up in that, and I'm going to support him in that. I was like, Kelly, why in the world do you think I would say it was okay for you to watch something that dad has said no to? That's silly, and that's not going to happen. She's like, oh, okay. You know, so they learn very young if they can get away with it or not. And if I was just like, oh, sure, Kelly, go ahead. Dad's not here. He won't know. That would be teaching her then deception, right? Knowing that dad has this rule, but mom is letting me do it. That's then, oh, so this is okay. I can sneak around behind dad's back. And then as they grow up, if you have that in the home where the mom is always going against the dad, or even the dad is completely overlooking the mom's wishes when it comes to, you know, more trivial things such as in the home or whatever, you're going to raise kids who figure out or think it's okay to sneak around. And I've always told my kids, I would rather have you be honest with me than try to be sneaky and deceptive. I don't like you being sneaky and deceptive. I don't like you sneaking around my back. You just need to be upfront with me and not be sneaky. And I've seen that with some of the bigger rebels that I've seen. As long as their parents didn't catch them, they thought they were okay. But they were behind their parents' back doing all sorts of things. And I didn't want that with my kids. Like I wanted them to be open and upfront with me when it came to stuff. And so I really tried instilling the whole, you need to come to me with everything. So the grouch attitude, Sarah said, what do you do with the grouch attitude that comes after? Like that comes after as far as like not getting their way. Um, I tell them to fix their attitude. I don't know. I'll tell them, you have a few minutes. Like you can either be grouchy about this and let it ruin the rest of your day, or sometimes they just need to go off by themselves for a little bit. Hannah's like that. She needs sometimes she just needs a hug. I know anytime I have to discipline her right afterwards, she wants a hug really, really badly. Like she craves that. And so I do think you need to implement that in, anytime that you have to discipline your kids, obviously show them that even though I had to discipline you, I still love you. I still care for you. Sometimes they need a minute by themselves. And then, I might have to discipline if the attitude gets out of hand. So, because kids have to learn that even if, and some of mine are still learning this, but they have to learn that they cannot just upend the entire home because they didn't get their way or they're grouchy about it. And I don't like it when kids make everything all about them. And I've seen some children where maybe they're a little bit more stubborn than the other kids. And so the parents have to devote more time to them as far as disciplinary measures. And if you let that go on for too long and it gets to where they're just taking up hours and hours of your time while the other kids are not getting any attention, that will kind of breed a spirit of resentment and bitterness towards that child, even from the siblings, towards the needy child from the siblings. So I try to teach my kids early on that the world does not revolve around them. And the McMurtry home doesn't have to stop. And you can't throw our entire house into chaos because you are grouchy or you have a bad attitude. Oftentimes I look at the root causes for grouchiness, and oftentimes it's they're overtired, so they just need a nap. They need to get to bed earlier. When our sleep cycle gets way off, my kids' attitudes get way off. So sometimes they could just need a hug. They could need a snuggle. They could need time away. They could need a nap. They could just need a bath or a distraction. As the mom, we kind of know our kids the best, and we can kind of gauge what actions need to be taken. But I don't think that a kid should continue for the entire day unless they're like sick or something. Sometimes they could be sick, but if they're just copying an attitude because they didn't get their way, I try to nip that in the bud pretty early on. I might let them pout for a couple minutes, but I kind of nip it in the bud because then they're just throwing the whole house into chaos. So yeah, and there is. And sometimes you'll find with kids, you have harder ones and you have easier ones. And oftentimes, unfortunately, the easier ones get overlooked because you're pouring so much attention into the one that is acting out. And oftentimes they're acting out because they like that attention. They're craving that attention, even if it's negative attention. But it has a whole way of throwing the whole house off kilter. And so I do try to nip it in the bud kind of early. So kids need to learn that they're not the center of the universe from the time that they're small. Now, obviously, as the mom, it's a balance. You need to love and train them and correct them. But also they need to learn that there's other people in the home too. And so, yeah, with my kids, I just kind of try to nip it early in the bud. Yeah. Or early on. And then two, I want to say this. I mean, obviously kids are going to go through different stages. We all know that a very difficult stage is 2 to 4. That's very difficult. But as they get older, they should be learning more and more that the world doesn't revolve around them. The McMurtry home doesn't revolve around them or whatever. So it obviously starts panning out like the older that they get. And then when they're teenagers, they just want to be in their room. I know for Allie, it's reading a book, right? Or, watching a show or something. Like they don't even want to be around you half the time when they're teenagers. So it gets to that point. But when they're little, they really like that attention. And obviously, you can give it to them, but when they start acting out, I often, and this is totally going down a rabbit trail, but like I often will look at if I have one that's 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and they're acting out, I look at maybe there's a root cause. Have I been too busy with these other things and not paying enough attention? And I've often found that if I just go on a little outing with said child, things improve drastically. So they just needed more of my one-on-one attention. But then you have to be careful with that, because then you don't want them to get to a point where they expect that all the time, right? And now they're still demanding a lot of your attention. So it's just a balancing game. I know I say it all the time, but it is. It's a balancing game. And we as the moms know our kids the best. We know if they're lacking in an area. Sometimes there's bad stages that they go through, or stages where they require more of our attention. But as they get older, that should definitely start fizzling out. And it should pretty much be, they should be pretty well adjusted by the time they're like 13, 14. I would say for me, 10 to like 14 with my girls is the hardest age, just because it's right before puberty and hormones are going crazy, and that's always a really hard time. But then once they hit 14, it gets really good. It gets a lot better. Kind of evens out with my girls. So, and I've raised more girls than boys. So yeah, and I have more girls than boys. So that's kind of been my experience. But anyways, if you have any other questions, go ahead and leave them in the chat. Go ahead, like this video, thumbs up it, put the bell on, subscribe, all that good stuff. If you haven't, it helps the algorithm. Go ahead and leave a comment, share, whatever you can do to help get it out. So I hope you all have a great week. And I am happy because our days now are lengthening. We gain about an hour, hour and a half in February of daylight. Super happy about that. Next week, we're supposed to be in the 40s here in Illinois. Super happy about that. So I'm glad January is over, and we're coming into some of my favorite parts of the year, spring and summer. And so I'm definitely looking forward to the next few weeks. Look for some guests. Okay, just froze there for a second. Look for some guests, and I should have a couple guests on in the month of February. So I hope you all have a great week. Go home, love God, love your husband, and love your kids, and love them well. And we will see you guys next week.